As if you didn't already know, you are listening to Men of Abundance, episode 156, with Larry Hagner. Today, we're filling your cup with the Good Dad Project.
Welcome to Men of Abundance, the podcast for those looking to level up their lives by hanging out with some of the greatest leaders and established professionals in our community, living a life of integrity, honor, and the abundance mentality. Prepare to pay it forward with your host, former Army medic turned lifestyle entrepreneur, Wally Carmichael.
What's up, all of you amazing, abundant leaders out there. I am Wally Carmichael, your host of the Men of Abundance podcast, the Pay It Forward community. I am glad to bring you today Larry Hagner of the Good Dad Project. And man, if you've been listening, you know the deal. Please share this episode and share this conversation with everybody you come in contact with. I'm telling you right now, you are going to get so much out of this conversation. You're going to want to share it with your boys. You're going to want to share it with your girls. You're going to want to share it with everybody you come in contact with. And if this is the first episode that you've heard of Men of Abundance, if you're just getting introduced, number one, thank the person that introduced you to Men of Abundance. If that was me, you're welcome. And if it was somebody else, make sure you go thank them. And then be abundant in your life today by sharing this with other people. Guys, I'm going to get right into our conversation today because this is a long one, but it is a good one. Now, as I already mentioned, our featured guest today is Larry Hagner of the Good Dad Project. And Larry grew up virtually in a fatherless environment for most of his life. In fact, he didn't even meet his real father until he was 30 years old. And as fate would have it, their paths crossed as he walked into a coffee shop 8 years ago. And Larry, as he mentions, is happy to say they have had a great relationship. They now have a great relationship and spend a great deal of time together. It was through his own childhood struggles that he realized his true passion for being a dad. And this is just a start of where the Good Dad Project came from. And Larry explains much more as we go into our conversation here today. Men of Abundance, it is my honor to introduce you to Larry Hagner. Larry, welcome to Men of Abundance, brother. How you doing?
What's up, brother? It's good to be here, man. I'm honored. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
Yeah, I'm super stoked, man. I've been following you for quite some time. As I was leading up to our conversation here, I was going back and listening to some of the older stuff. And episode number 50 was the one where you kind of did like a cap of everything that's been going on, where Good Dad Project came from. And I noticed a voice that I recognized, and I was like, that is Sean Stevenson.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that you guys, I've only been listening to your show more recently, but I dig Sean, man. He's a cool dude.
He's a great guy. We actually just met up for coffee the other day. We're really good friends. I've known him since 2012, so 6 years. Nearly. So yeah, he's a great guy.
Yeah, he really is. And man, does he have the voice for radio and podcast, man? Just an amazing, amazing voice. And he's so freaking funny.
Yeah. I don't know if you ever, how long you followed the podcast for, but, he got the nickname on my show, Audio Velvet. And my nickname was Audio Corduroy because, of course, my podcasting voice wasn't nearly as smooth and suave as Sean's. But he was a great co-host. We were together for 88 shows, and we loved it. The thing is that we got my brand really started exploding, and so did his, and it just got up to the point where scheduling was just a nightmare. And some of these big guests, it's sometimes really hard to nail down these big guests. And we literally, Sean and I only had like Friday afternoons to record. That was the only time that we could record. So, in order not to pass up on some of these big guests that we've had, I had to redo my schedule a little bit because they couldn't, the big guests couldn't. So we just got to the point where like, you know what, both of our brands are getting super busy. He had just launched Sleep Smarter. He was going on book tours, and it was just so hard to nail down things. So we decided, just part ways on podcasts. He was going to focus on Model Health Show. I was going to focus on GDP, and that's what we did. So we're still good friends, and all is well.
Yeah, good plan, man. Good plan, because his model health show is on point. He must do tons of research because, guys, if you haven't listened to the model health show and you want to learn something about health, that's the one to listen to because, one, it's fun. It's not boring at any means. And what is his co-host name? I can't remember her name.
Jade, but she's not with him anymore.
Oh, is that right? I haven't listened to him in quite a while, actually. So, I'm more focused on other stuff right now, but...
They parted ways as well, probably 6 weeks ago. So it was in
so it was more
at the end. It was September. Yeah.
Yeah. Because they're just funny together. They're just hilarious. And then he launched his books, as you mentioned, Sleep Smarter. Amazing stuff, man. So listen, before we get too much into the show, I like to start out with an attitude of gratitude. What do you have to be grateful for today, Larry?
Man, it's a good question. I always try to be grateful for at least 2 or 3 things every day, and I always try to focus on gratitude that money can't buy. So that's what I always like to focus on. Like, what can I be grateful for that money can't buy? Because I think we can all be like, oh, I'm grateful for my car, I'm grateful for my house, I'm grateful for the food in my fridge, but what I'm grateful for is, especially here lately, like when I wake up in the morning, I'm usually very grateful for a really good night's sleep. So that's the one thing I'm grateful for. Also, the love of my kids. I've got 4 boys, 11, 9, 3, and 1, and I'm grateful that they're in my life. And even when things are crazy and annoying and loud and nuts, and as much as like that rattles my brain sometimes, like I'm just like, you know what? Today I'm grateful that my house is loud because I'm going to wake up tomorrow, my kids are going to be out of here, and my house is going to be quiet. I'm going to be like, man, I really miss when my house was loud. So that's what I'm grateful for. Yeah,
and I can, looking at your family, I can imagine it's pretty darn loud in your house, and I'm missing that right now because I don't know if you know, I think we may have talked when we were talking a couple weeks ago that I'm doing some split ops right now. My family's in Tampa, and I am, at the time of this recording, my family's in Tampa, and I'm still here in Hawaii, so I'm going to be joining them in a couple months. But it's a little bit too quiet where I'm at right now, and I've got one already out of the house anyway, and an 18-year-old who's just itching to do something, and then I've got my little 8-year-old, my little guy that is still my little shadow, my little buddy, my workout partner.
There you go, man. Yeah.
So, I like to ask this question because it's a little bit thought-provoking, and some people get kind of stunned by it. And that is, how would you describe yourself?
I would describe myself as a very transparent, I would say, tell it like it is type of man. And I would also say that I'm relentless. I'm an executor. I'm very self-critical of myself. I can be my best friend, and I can also be my worst enemy, without a doubt. I'm a dedicated husband and father, and I'm a guy who makes a million mistakes a day. I've had the Good Dad Project podcast now for 2 years, and I always say, not only am I the president, the CEO, and the host of the GDP, but I'm also the first guy in line as a client. Because that's the exact reason I started the podcast. I was like, I'm not very good at this father thing. I need to be better at it. So I'm just going to become a student of it. And every week I get to talk to people who are a heck of a lot smarter than I am, and I get to learn from them. So that's how I describe myself.
Perfect. I absolutely love that. And I can 100% relate because while I know that I am living a life of abundance, and I want to share that experience and share this experience with so many other men and families, I certainly in no means have it all figured out either. And I think some people sometimes get the idea that, hey, Larry's got this Good Dad Project. He must be the best dad in the world. And while you're a pretty darn good dad, and we're going to get more into that here in just a minute and your background and how that all came about, none of us have it all figured out. And that's why these masterminds are so important. And these alliances like you have are just critical in today's day and age because we're just in a different world than we were years ago where the whole family was out, working in the fields or building a business or doing so much more together than we do today. Our kids grow up, they leave the house, they go off with their families and they do their thing. And we're busy all the time as well. Not all of us have the opportunity to stay home and spend every minute with our kids and all the time that we would like to do. We're trying to make ends meet, man, and trying to get it done.
Yeah, man. I mean, gosh, you said so much there. which I think really encompasses like the common man out there. You know, we all have these desires to provide, to protect, to preside, over our families, but sometimes we get sucked into so much providing and we forget, that significant thing of spending that time with them. No one at the end of their life, looks back in their life and is like, I wish I would have spent more time at work and less with my kids. But I also think that there's a balance too. I think that there's a balance between, where I don't want to say too much time with our kids, but I want to say not taking enough time for ourselves to fill our cup, because when we don't do that, we get in trouble. We tend to get fried. And when we're trying to selflessly serve and pour into others, I mean, you have to take time for yourself. And I see men, and me included, man, we get so filled up with guilt and oh, I shouldn't do that. That's selfish. I shouldn't go to the gym and take care of my health. That's selfish. I shouldn't, as you said, join that mastermind community that's going to take $67 out of my checking account. That's food off my table, even though that's something that can fulfill a man and fill him up and fill that cup. Or I shouldn't pick up that $20 book that's going to make me a better person. Or I shouldn't go and spend, $500 to go to that conference that's going to sharpen some skills. We have all these, we're so ridden with guilt that we don't want to take, those opportunities. We don't want to take those resources. But men, I mean, and Wally, this as well from your podcast and everything you're doing, you've got to take that time. And if you don't take that time, it is going to, it's going to well up in you. It's going to swell up in you. It's going to pop, and it's going to be disastrous. It's just like, I was talking to a guy this morning who actually came over and joined the Alliance, and we talked about a lot of things that you can do in your life for preventative measures. And I don't know what it was. He ended up joining, and it just clicked for him. He's like, you know what? I never thought of it like this. He's like, I don't wait till there's a problem with my car before I go do preventative maintenance. I go and get the oil changed. I check the tires. I get the tires rotated. If I don't do that, if I don't do that preventative care, I'm in serious trouble. I'm going to have to replace the engine. And our lives are the same way, but we don't think about it that way. We will run ourselves into the ground, for the sake we feel so guilty for doing any of these things. But man, we got to do it. It's got to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Larry, why do you think that is? Why do you think it is that so many men feel that guilt in recharging and refilling the cup?
It's a good question. I think if you ask different men, they'll have different reasons. But I think it boils down to it doesn't matter what resource we're talking about, because let's face it, when it comes to financial means, men are literally like all over the board, right? We can, some have a hard time paying their mortgage, and some we just come from endless means. And then there's the resource of time. Men feel really guilty taking the time, because they're like, well, if I take the time, then that's time away from my family, or time I can be spending doing something else. Like, it shouldn't be for me. So what I see is the two things that really get men are time and money. Mm-hmm. So, and whatever that looks like for you. Here's another one. I've seen this. I'm constantly learning this in my own community, but worthiness, like, get that worthiness. So, like, for instance, I see men have a hard time, like, for instance, when they join like a mastermind, for instance, they're like, well, I don't know if I'm like the caliber of man that deserves to be in a mastermind. I don't know if I'm that caliber of guy who can contribute anything, because I feel like I'm weak at everything. And I'm like, and I always tell every guy this, I was like, no, that's your own perception. That's you talking. You actually have strengths that other men don't. You have things in your life that you're good at. You just don't realize that you're good at it until you get around men and they start talking, and then they realize, and then you realize that they need help in certain things that you're pretty proficient at. So maybe you're not great at patience, but you're really good with finances. A lot of guys need help with that. Or maybe your weak spot is taking care of your health, but man, you're great at relationships. Every guy, it's a yin and yang. We complement each other. But I would say it's those three things. It's money, it's time, and it's our own perception of us being worthy.
Wow, yeah, absolutely. So you've got the Alliance, and I was fortunate enough to be a fly on the wall in the Dead Edge Alliance. So actually, let me rephrase that. I thought I was going to be a fly on the wall because you invited me in there. And your group forced me to participate. I wouldn't say forced. I did it willingly. But I didn't expect to have as much participation in the group that I did. And I truly enjoyed the hour that we spent together, a little over an hour. How do guys get into the group and tackle some of these issues, and not really issues, some of these shortcomings that they have about themselves, and get over some of these hurdles?
Are you asking like as far as logistically or as far as like engagement?
Yeah, engagement.
Engagement, yeah. So when a man comes and joins, our alliance group, then they're then a part of what we call that brotherhood, that tribe. We currently have about 154 members that are a part of that group, and they're just on fire. How we get together logistically is we get together weekly on these Zoom calls where we can see everyone, we can talk to everybody. I create all the call content, so we tackle a different theme every single month. Like, for instance, like leadership, we'll tackle that, and we'll break it into 4 parts, and we'll talk about different parts of it weekly. We've also talked about ego. We've talked about confidence. We've talked about work-life integration. We've talked about management. This month, we're talking about productivity. And as far as getting men to engage, so on these calls, we have anywhere from I would say 10 to 18 guys on a video call in a virtual meeting at a time. And for instance, when I lead a call or one of my team leads lead a call, our goal, our mission is to get every single man to engage in that call, because we truly believe that every man has something to offer. Mm-hmm. And when whether they feel that they can, when a man starts to speak up, he starts to realize what his strengths are. So we ensure that every man talks, because that's super important. We also ensure that we end the call with like, okay, we've talked about a lot in the 60 minutes. Let's end the call on what are the takeaways. So we'll go around the bend, and ask these guys, what was the one thing you took from this call, and what's the one thing you're going to do different in between now and the next 7 days? And it's unbelievable, and that becomes another critical sharing point of that call, because 10 to 18 guys, we all got our perspective on what we got for it, but we hear different perspectives like, oh man, I didn't think of that. Oh, I didn't think of that either. So it's really cool how we do that.
Yeah, and everybody was really engaging, and everybody's in their own environment. Some are sitting in their home office, some are actually sitting at their work office. One dude was actually on a walk, and you could see him on video, and he's on a walk, and everybody was just so relaxed and just enjoying the moment and engaging. And the group is just very dynamic, and the conversation was funny. Everybody's cracking on each other, because obviously many of you have been together for quite some time. And I think there were 5 of us that were brand new, had never been in there before. And, a couple of them were kind of shy about coming out and talking, but you really engaged everybody. And I just thought it was brilliant the way you did that.
Man, thank you, brother. I appreciate that. And yeah, When men get together, I don't know if you've ever heard of Stephen Mansfield, but he wrote the book. He's coming on the GDP podcast here next week. Mm-hmm. Just a tremendous man. And when you fully understand the core things that you need to build a tribe, you understand what to implement into those calls. You understand what to implement into that community, the much needed things. And you know what, men. First of all, number one, men need a place where they can go be themselves, okay? They need a place where they can go be themselves, and they can basically, show everything that they're not so good at that they want to work on, and they need a place that they can also empower and pour into and strengthen others. Men also need a place that's lighthearted, where it's okay to banter. Believe it or not, that is super important. I'm a very spiritual guy. I'm a religious guy. And I'm a part of a men's group at my church, and I fully believe in that. However, one thing that I've noticed that church groups, men's groups, that miss out on is that banter, because you don't know if it's necessarily quote unquote appropriate to have that banter, but it's so important, because men, 98% of our lives is so serious. It's so tight, it's so planned, we're so serious about everything. We need that release, to be able to banter, to be able to joke, to be able to laugh. and to just be ourselves. And that's what you have to have there. I mean, there's many other aspects to, how to build a tribe and the things that have to be included, but you have to have that.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. 100%. Larry, I know some of your backstory, and I want to share that with our listeners out there, because it's just important to share this kick in the gut moment and for people to understand that somebody that is seemingly so put together and got their stuff together like Larry Hagner does, I mean, you kind of cringe at that. You're like, well, not so much, because you don't know my whole story. I think it's important that we share this information and then talk about how we got out of that. How do we move forward, and how do we, are we using it? Some people are even using that as their, turning their mess into their message. But at this point, I'd like for you to share that kick in the gut moment with us that really kind of took you to your knees.
I've had so many of those, man. Like, I was trying to think of just one, but we all have, right? But if I could, I wanted to answer this question with going back to maybe my childhood. So I'll be real brief with this, but my mom and biological father were married for about 4 years. They got divorced when I was 1. My dad left. My mom, for the next several years, for the next 20 years, had my biological father was completely out of my life. She was married 3 times within that next 20 years, dated a variety of different men, but every guy that came into my life was just this very toxic father figure. Some were mentally abusive, some were physically abusive, some were both. Nearly all of them were alcoholics. So I had this really jaded sort of childhood, and I don't share that out of pity, like, hey, I had this messed up childhood. I just share that for perspective. And I think as I look back at my childhood, I was lost. I was so lost, and I was overweight, and I was fat, and I had zero confidence. Grades were terrible. I didn't have work ethic. I had nothing. And I had nothing for a lot of my own fault. I could have kicked myself in the ass at any point, but I just didn't necessarily know how to. At the age of 8 and 10, 12, 13, I just didn't know how to. And I would say the first time I had just a really big kick in the ass, and I had just a kick in the gut moment, was my mom was dating this guy when I was 15, and this guy he was a freaking nightmare. This guy was an absolute nightmare. But he was an ex-bodybuilder, an ex-fitness guy. And I'll never forget my freshman year of high school. I went to this dance. It was a mixer, so none of us had dates. It was just a bunch of girls, a bunch of guys. And I had been eyeballing this girl all night long. I'd wanted to dance with her. And finally, I waited 4 hours, 3 hours to the end of the night. They're playing the last 3 slow songs. And I go up to this girl. And I'm like, hey, how are you? I was I was shaking, right? I was like, would you like to dance? No kidding around. She looked me up. She looked me down. She looked me up and then down, and just had this look of utter disgust on her face. And she's like, absolutely not. And I'm like, and she walked away, and I was like, oh my God. So I went home, and I told my mom's boyfriend about this, 'cause the time he was living with us. And he looked at me, he goes, so are you tired of being a fat ass yet? And I'm like, what? And he's like, are you tired of being a fat ass yet? Just yes or no. Are you tired of it? And I'm like, yeah, I'm tired of it. He's like, okay, well, why don't we do something about it? I was like, well, what do we do? And at this point, I was terrible at athletics, never worked out a day in my life. I ate total crap. He's like, I'll get you up every morning, 4:30 a.m. I'm going to help you work out before school. And then not only that, but I'm going to teach you how to eat. And over the next year and a half, I lost about 50 pounds and got in really good shape. And that's been a part of my life ever since, is fitness. So we're going back, 25 years. It's been a part of my life ever since, but it was a low point. It was like a kick in the balls moment, but that is definitely a kick in the gut moment that got me straight.
Larry, when you said that, when you mentioned that he said, are you tired of being a fat ass? Something that empowers me. That just made me, I just got this huge smile on my face. Now, some people might look at that as like, who the hell you think you're talking to, or something like that, because I'm kind of a straightforward type of guy, and I've used that terminology before with other guys, and some people appreciate it and many don't. But the bottom line is, he was willing to help. As toxic as he was in his element when it came to that. And I just think that's cool as hell that you were able to make that, at least that connection with him.
Yeah, I mean, out of all that disaster situation that it was, that was one good thing that came out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, that's one of those things you can go back and say, you can find good out of every situation and almost every relationship. Not every, there's just some that are just a disaster without a doubt. There's no value at all. But that one had some value in it, and it took you 25 years, up to this point. So that's awesome.
Thanks, man.
So, Good Dad Project. Where did this all come from? How did that all? What was the mindset? Where did that just manifest into your life?
Well, I would say the Good Dad Project came out of like what you would probably call enough is enough moment. Mm-hmm. So if you want, I can talk about both.
Absolutely, let's do it.
Yeah. So I had the Good Dad Project was sprouted out of an enough is enough moment. I was a dad for 5 years. I've been a dad now for almost 12. But at the time, about 5 years, and I was your typical guy. I didn't know what I was doing. I was frustrated. I was pissed off all the time. I was irritable. I had zero patience. I wasn't enjoying fatherhood, right? And to be honest with you, that man rears his ugly head every now and again too. Mm-hmm. So, there are my good days with being a father, and there are days where I'm like, what is wrong with me today? But you have to give yourself a swift kick in the rear, to get back in line. But I guess at least now I can say I have some extra tools in my tool belt to get me to that place versus just walking around miserable. But the Good Dad Project, I didn't actually meet my biological father until I was 30, which that will kind of mess with your head quite a bit if you let it. We've had a relationship now for the past 12 years. It's really good. It's more of a friendship, I would say. But I didn't have that very solid father figure growing up, so I didn't really learn from example. I'm not saying that's the reason that I was not the best father. The reason I wasn't the best father was my fault. It was me. Like I was in my own way, and I take full ownership of that, and I still take full ownership of the days where I don't have it right, and I act like a fool. But the Good Dad Project really sprouted out of an absolute low point in my life. I was a typical guy. I was doing great in my career. At the time, I was doing martial arts 3 times a week. I was really into my hobbies. I had 2 kids at the time. I had a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, 5 and 3. And I was doing the whole fatherhood thing from like an arm's length. And one night I was packing because we were getting ready to move, and I hate moving more than life itself. I was packing, and I told my 3-year-old, who's now my 9-year-old, like, hey, don't unpack any of these boxes in this room. And it was his playroom. I went upstairs. It took me like 3 hours, half the night, to pack all this stuff up. Came back downstairs, and he had like just thrown everything around, unpacked everything, and now I got just freaking pissed. And I spanked him. I yelled at him. My wife was like, oh my God, like, why don't you, he's 3. Like, he just wants to get to his toys. Like, what the hell? And I was just like, what the hell happened to me? Like, what just happened? And there was so much pent up anger, rage, irritability, isolation. I was more mad at myself than anything. And I went into my office and I did the thing that a lot of guys do, just distract myself with something. And I got on Facebook, started messing around, and I saw this thing in the left-hand corner that says create a page. And I was emotional. I kind of call that my Jerry Maguire moment, where I was just like, I think I said to myself, enough is enough. I'm tired of this. I'm tired of living this way. Like, I am so tired of being this father that I have literally, from the time I've been a father, set out, this is what I'm not going to do. And I'm doing all of these things that I said I would never do. So I created a page called the Good Dad Project. And I was the project. I was like, if I'm going to do this, like, I need to get help. Like, I need to just surrender the ego. I need to figure out how to be better at this. And that's what I did. I was like, I'll just create this page. Whoever follows it, but I'm going to just publicly go out and look for something. I'm going to try to learn something new every day. Just learn something new every day, and then I'll share it on this page. So I did that. And I started noticing that one thing was in common. If you take self-development, a self-development education, a self-development perspective, I mean, think about it. Men in our, we all want to be better at our businesses. As men, we don't hesitate for 1 second to be like, I think I'm going to go take that leadership course because it'll make me better at my business. But we think 10 different ways to not do that as a father. Because, that's a sign of weakness. I should automatically be good at that. I'm a human. I'm a father, so therefore I should automatically be good at it. And I knew I wasn't. But if you look at self-development, and then you look at that through the lens of a father, and you take those skills and you implement them as a father, guaranteed, if you become a better person, you will become a better father. It's the same thing like with business and leadership skills. You can take those skills and implement them into your fatherhood life. Those two lives are not necessarily separate. You can take those skills and transfer them into being a better father. You can even transfer some skills of being a better father into business. So that's what I decided to do. And I got to be honest with you, Wally. I mean, the hardest thing in the world for me to do was to surrender that ego and to raise my hand and be like, I don't have this figured out. I need help. And I'm sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. And enough is enough. So at that moment, what happened was I was like, I'm just going to be a student of this. And that's what I did. I became a student of it, and it took a lot of the pressure off, and it's turned into what it's turned into today.
So you create this page on Facebook, and then what, guys, just start finding it, or did you start inviting folks over and kind of having these conversations? How did that work out?
No, what happened was it was really weird, right? Because I started getting a bit of a following on the page, and then I'll never forget, it was like just a few months later, I got a call from a women's group, and they're like, hey, would you mind, we've been following your page, we want you to come and speak at this church for this women's group. And I was like, okay, well, how many women? And they're like 250. I was like, 250? Yeah. I was like, what do you want to know about? And they're like, we want to know like what you're doing. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And they're like, well, that's okay. Like, can you just come and talk about what you've learned? And I'm like, oh, wow. So that's what I did. I kind of took some of the content that I was learning, online, and some of the research I was doing, the books I was reading, and I just sort of made it into some content. And I mean, the first speaking presentation I did, it was just sort of natural, and it was some of the things that fathers struggle with most, and some of the things that husbands, and I'll never forget, like, speaking in front of these women, I was terrified, but yet they really enjoyed it. I made it fun and made them laugh, and it was a really good time. And then I decided to write an ebook and start a blog in 2013. So just a year later, and I started a blog and wrote an ebook. And then a couple years later, I was like, I think I want to write a book, like a book, just take a stab at that, even though it seemed overwhelming. So again, I was looking at a blank sheet of paper, and I was like, I want something. I don't want something fluffy. I don't want something that's going to be, rainbows and unicorns, because men don't really gravitate towards that, and neither do I.
Right.
But a lot of the research I was doing out there made the fatherhood thing so fluffy. So I was like, what about the dad's edge? I like the sound of that. And what if I could take like 9 of the top things that I've learned and put them into this book? And so I wrote The Dad's Edge, and I was very transparent in the book. I'm like, I'm not an expert. I'm just a student of this, and maybe you'll relate to it. It's written by a dad for a dad. It's written by a struggling dad for a struggling dad. And I wrote that book, and then in 2015, I started a podcast, and I've been podcasting for the past 2 years, and wrote a children's book called Daddy Will Always Love You and Protect You, because my 9-year-old challenged me to do that. And I did that. And then now for the past 2 years, we've had what I would call the Dad Edge Mastermind community, which is the Dad Edge Alliance, where we have helped. In 2016, we had over 200 men go through the program. And now in 2017, I developed what's called the Alliance, which is what you saw, which is our mastermind community.
Wow. Amazing. I love the story. It's just truly an amazing story. It's one of my favorite enough is enough moment stories that I've heard so far
Well,
on this
thanks.
show. It truly is. It really touches me because I relate in so many different ways. The anger that came out of your son, I've moved so many times, and I can totally relate to that
Awful.
conversation, man. Yeah, and generally most people, I'm usually having somebody else move, packing everything for us, but we do pack a lot of stuff. Yeah, definitely relate. So what are some, I would love to, I know there's so many amazing good news stories that you've gotten from the Alliance and just in your regular community. You got a Facebook community as well. I'd love to hear a couple, at least one good news story that you would be able to share with us.
Oh, wow. It's hard to pick just one. So we've had, I'll tell you just a couple of, we're big on confidentiality in the Alliance. But I'll tell you a couple so guys, one of the things we struggle with, I'll tell you the top 5 things that I've seen men struggle with. One is health. One is work-life balance, intimacy and relationships, connection with kids, and confidence. Those are the things that I think we struggle with the most in our life, and finances, if you want to add that 6th one. Mm. So I've seen men, let's talk about health first. I've seen several men in our community. One guy in particular has lost 76 pounds. 76 pounds. And we've probably have had, like I said, out of 153 guys, I would say at least 50 have health goals and have lost a substantial amount of weight. Anything from 10 pounds to one guy who's 76 pounds. And I scratch my head. And I've talked to these guys, and I'm like, I don't understand how is it you guys are losing weight in the Alliance? Like, it's not like we're like this weight loss thing for men. Like, how is it you're doing it? Like, and I think the best answer that I've heard is there's a million ways to lose weight. There's a million ways to get healthy. Google it. You'll see pages and pages of how to lose weight. It's no secret, how to do it. The challenge comes is you have to know 2 things. You have to know who you are as a person. Who you are is so important. Once you find out who you are, then you're like, okay, now I know who I am. Now I know why I need to take care of myself. But no one takes that step. Always is like, okay, how do I lose weight? Okay, for the next 30 days, I'm going to eat broccoli and chicken. That's how I'm going to lose weight. But they miss that part where it's like, well, I need to know who I am first, and then understand the why I need to take care of myself. Once you understand who you are and the why, the how is the easy part. Take a pick. You want to do paleo? Do paleo. The 30-day cleanse or whatever. Or do AdvoCare's got a 24-day challenge. You can do 30. You can do a 30-day no alcohol challenge, whole food challenge. You do anything you want. But when you understand who you are and that why, that's when it becomes very, very clear. And that's what I've heard from these guys.
So let's dive into that. I want to kind of dig into that just a little bit, who you are. What does that look like? How does that come about, and how do they end up figuring that out in the Alliance?
They figure that, so we take every man through what I call an I am statement and a core value discovery. So how do we do that? Most men will go to their grave not understanding who they are, what their core values are, what their mission is. We are always searching for your why. If you go on social media, like the big marketing ploy right now is like, find your why. Why, I didn't really understand this until I had a Navy SEAL on the podcast by the name of Tom Shea, who wrote the best-selling book Unbreakable. Mm-hmm. And he totally debunked this why for us, and why your why won't get you very far. So it goes back to your why is like the sugar in your coffee, and your coffee is who you are. So like, for instance, if I know without a shadow of a doubt that my health is important to me, because my health is not only important to me, I need to feel good, I need to be mentally clear, I need to be emotionally clear. And if I'm healthier, I'm going to show up better in my business, I'm going to show up better with my kids, I'm going to show up better with my wife, I'm going to have better sex with my wife, I'm going to sleep better. All these things, like, I want to be this mentally clear, emotionally clear, mentally focused, physically present. I want to be that man. That's who I am. So how do I get there? Well, the how I get there is really I can pick anything that I want. But if I don't understand that part of like, hey, health is part of my core values and why it's part of my core values, the how doesn't matter. Like, for instance, who you are is a level of commitment to what you're going to do. So, for instance, if I don't realize that health is a critical aspect of who I am and part of my core values, if I want to go out and run a marathon, like that's like, hey, I think I'm going to go out and run a marathon, there's 20 different training programs that I could choose from on how to run that marathon. But if I don't understand who I am, I'm a committed, healthy person, and I want to do this because I also value achievement in my life, then how am I going to accomplish that? You know, that's where a lot of people bail out. That's why New Year's resolutions just don't work. Mm-hmm. There's so many hows out there, but people are just like, it's not important to me. So understanding who you are, why it's important to you, and that's why we take guys through a core value exercise. So we take these guys through a core value exercise. They discover their 5 to 7 core values, and then they write what's called a being statement. Mm-hmm. And that being statement then becomes the foundation, that gut check. When anything else comes their way, they go back to that being statement, those core values, and be like, this is important to me, and now I know why. And I'll say this one last thing. If you don't understand what your core values are, it's no big deal, because most people don't understand. We go to our graves not understanding that. But you can always get a sense of what your core values might be, because on a conscious level, a lot of us don't know what they are. But when we operate and we're doing something, like for instance, if you're doing something, you're like, I don't know what it is about this, but it doesn't feel right to me. Right. It just doesn't feel right. So we've all had that feeling. That is your intuition that's connected to your core values that's telling you this is not in line with who you are. That's why it doesn't feel right. And then there are those other times in our life, like, I don't know what it is about this situation, but man, it feels good. It feels right. This is where I should be. You're operating within those core values. And if you can then make decisions on how to accomplish certain things, do certain things, execute certain things, and it's within those core values, that's when you're unstoppable.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for breaking that down, because that really makes a lot more sense in what you're saying, and I completely relate with that. And that core value, that's one of the exercises that I went through with your group a couple nights ago. And I've done stuff like that before in various venues, and I've done that with other guys. It's really amazing when you're doing it in person and you see their eyes open up and their whole demeanor completely changes once they realize, something similar to what their being statement is, or their values, or their mission statement for themselves is pretty amazing.
It is. It's such a powerful, profound moment. I don't know if you've seen what we do in the Alliance. I've shared a little bit with the Dad Edge, but once these guys get really, really clear with what that I am statement is, the Alliance becomes ways that they can now put tools in their toolbox, and the who they are is their toolbox. And then we insert the tools in there, and then they go execute upon these areas in their life. But what we do also is I'm like, hey, once you're done with your I am statement, send it to me, and then send me your favorite photo of your entire family. And what I do is I take that I am statement, I put it on that family photo, I send it to them, and it just becomes like literally like that. That's, I don't want to say their epitaph, because that's when they die, but it becomes something that's now written in stone. That's part of their life.
Yeah. In fact, you did that for me, and it is the home screen on my phone, and I've got it up on my computer as well. And in fact, guys, I'll have that same picture that Larry did for me. I'll have that in the show notes at menofabundance.com. So go check that out. It's pretty cool. I dig that, and I appreciated that.
Awesome, man. I'm glad you liked it.
So, brother, we could talk all day long about this subject. You and I are definitely going to get on the call again, either for the show or not, because I dig talking with you, and I love connecting with you and communicating with you on social media. But in person, so much better. But we're at the point of the show where we're going to pay it forward. You ready to do that?
I'm ready to do it. Let's rock it, brother.
Outstanding. So share with Men of Abundance 1 to 3 actionable steps that they can take today.
I would say 1 to 3 actionable steps is first, number one, if you want to become a better man, if you want to become a better husband, if you want to become more effective, efficient in your work, don't do it alone. Don't do it alone. Be open to learning. Being open to learning is not a sign of weakness. To raise your hands and say, hey, I don't have this whole thing figured out, but I'm willing to learn, that is such a profound sign of strength. It's not a sign of weakness. The other thing, too, is give yourself permission to exercise resources in your life to make you better, whether that's from a financial standpoint, hire a coach, be a part of a mastermind, go do that conference on leadership or whatever else that you've been wanting to do, even if it's a few $100s, go do it. It's going to change. It's going to be a pivot point for you. Also, give yourself the permission to take time to do these things. You put fuel in your car, you take time to do that. You give your car oil changes, that takes time and resources. You got to do the same for yourself. So time and resources, be generous with yourself. Give yourself some grace, when it comes to that. The other thing that I'll say too is, and I think this is a critical one. Build your tribe. Build your band of brothers. So many of us men, we're surrounded by people physically, mentally and emotionally. We are completely isolated. Build that band of brothers that you have in your life. It's so critical. It's so important. And I'm not talking about the guys that you hung out with in college or the guys you hung out with in high school and you talk about the same 5 things. You talk about the weather, you talk about work, you talk about your kids and what you did on the weekends. I'm talking about getting deep with the guys in your life and be that rock and that foundation for the man who's on the right side of you and the left side, and allow those men to be the rock for you as well.
Extremely powerful action steps right there. I back that up 100%. Absolutely love it. What daily habits make the biggest impact in your life, Larry?
Definitely physical exercise is a big one for me. It helps me both physically, it helps me mentally, it helps me emotionally, it helps me be more productive. Daily gratitude is another one. Another one I'll share is purposely and intentionally loving my wife. That's a big one. I mean, so many of us will put that relationship on automatic pilot. Man, love that woman to the depths of your soul and love her like you're going to die tomorrow. Like literally, that's what you want to do.
Purposefully and intentionally. That is extremely powerful. So many guys, like you said, really are just going through the motions and not taking those extra steps to plan ahead and plan a day spa. Just let your wife go. Plan a day spa and put her in a hotel for the night, and maybe have a conjugal visit if she calls you or something, but give her that time to just go. She needs to recharge too, man. So we're talking about you recharging, but make sure your wife gets that opportunity as well and give it to her.
I agree.
So what would you recommend other than your book, obviously, and we'll definitely have that posted in the show notes at menofabundance.com as well. But what would you recommend that our abundant leaders read or listen to?
I'm always reading books, and in the Alliance, we're always reading books as well. I can give you a list of a couple of them that have just really, really rocked our world. One is No More Mr. Nice Guy by Dr. Robert Glover. I interviewed him on the show. He was fantastic. Essentialism is another one. It's so critical for men because we take on so much, and we tend to overwhelm ourselves, and we tend to not enjoy life, and that's when we get really irritable and pissed off, and we try to be everything to everyone, and we end up being nothing for anyone. Another one is Unbeatable Mind by Mark Divine. That's a great one. I just interviewed Gary John Bishop, who's a New York Times bestselling author of, I don't know if your show is clean or not, but I'll say it's Un-F Yourself. Mm-hmm. But his book has actually inspired me to write a book, and I just submitted the book proposal to an agent for it's basically a version of Un-F Yourself for fathers. So it's not going to be like his book, but it's going to be what a lot of the things that we talked about in this podcast are going to be included in that book. But those are the ones that those are game-changing books.
Excellent. Absolutely excellent. So I've got every one of those books on my list of books to get to, and I've got about 5 of them stacked up here on my desk that I'm next in line. But out of those 4 that you just mentioned, which one would you recommend to me to pick up next?
Have you read No More Mr. Nice Guy?
I have not, and that's one of the ones that I would personally put at the top of this book. That one and Un-F Yourself.
Yeah, either one of those is so good. I had Dr. Robert Glover on the podcast. He also spoke and did a Q&A for the Alliance. But that book, it will rattle you. It will, and so will Un-F Yourself. But it will rattle you because you're like, crap, like this whole book is about me. You know what I mean? So we all in the Alliance, we all read that book, and the guys were so funny that month. We did that in July, and the guys were so funny because they were like, "Oh my gosh, man, this book is so great, but it's pissing me off." Because like I feel like I'm reading my own life story. But the cool thing about that book, if I give you the 30,000-foot view, is it talks about how we as men, we're kind of programmed like, well, I want to make everybody else around me happy. And if I make everyone else around me happy, they'll automatically make me happy. And that just doesn't happen. And then we get resentful and pissed off and that kind of thing. But it talks about, instead of being that guy who's too nice and we say yes to everything and we let people walk on us, to become more what's called the integrated man, where we have these boundaries and we're more confident. We're very, very clear with what our needs are and how we communicate those needs. That book is awesome.
Yeah, and that's what I get from it, because I've heard him interviewed on multiple shows at this point, and I've been looking at the book for a while, and it does. I relate to it, and I've taken some stuff based off what he has said, and others as well, and some other guys that I follow as well, and I've been much more bold when I'm in various Facebook groups that I'm in, and I'm answering people's questions, or kind of giving, they'll ask the question, and I'll just give a very bold answer that most guys aren't giving. And from my observation and from my experience. And what I've found since I've been doing that over the last month or so, because normally I just kind of read and be passive in there, is I'm getting a lot more very valuable friend requests. And when I say valuable, I mean guys that truly want to connect and actually have a conversation, not somebody who just wants to come over and just hang out and see what's going on. I'm in 12, 13, 20 a day of guys that are connecting on my Facebook page, on my fan page, connecting with Men of Abundance, and connecting with me because, and I get it from the book, is that since I'm really kind of telling them what most guys aren't willing to tell them, they really want to hear this stuff. And guys are commenting on my other posts like, that sounds like it's something from a book. Is that something I can get more information on? And I'm like, well, it's kind of coming from myself and my podcast here, check it out type of thing. And because even when I was a young man, the girls would tell me I was always a skinny kid, but I was too nice. And many girls said, I don't really want to date you because you're just too nice. You're like my brother.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that sucks. So you're going to go date this asshole that's going to treat you like crap because you want a bad guy. And then I tried to be a bad guy. It just didn't work for me.
Right.
Not in that way. So that's the book I got to get. That's got to be the next one I pull out.
It's so good, man. It really is. It's so good. It will make you happy. It'll make you laugh. It'll piss you off, but it's all for the good.
I'm down for that, man.
Yeah.
I like straight talk. I just love straight talk, man. So what do you feel holds most people back from living a life of true abundance?
Ourselves.
Yes.
Ourselves, without a doubt. It's us. It's not our jobs. It's not our marriages. It's not our finances. It's us. Look in the mirror. That's what holds you back. That's what holds me back. I got to tell myself every day, like, stop getting in your own way. Get out of my way.
Yeah, and listen, guys, as soon as you make that realization that it is truly you, as long as it's somebody else or something else that you don't have control over, you have to wait for that to change. You have to wait for that person to change, that circumstance to change. And guess what? It's not going to happen. You can only enhance yourself. And I don't like to say that we change ourselves necessarily. We have to enhance our mindset, enhance ourselves, because you're already freaking awesome. And I'm not just blowing smoke. You really are. You have it in you. You have to pull it out, like this book we were just talking about, No More Mr. Nice Guy. You have to pull that part out of you. And once you realize that it's you, then only you can make the change and make the enhancements in your life to move forward.
Agreed, man. Totally agree.
Awesome. So what does living a life of abundance mean to you, Larry?
it means it's definitely a mental thing. It's not so much a physical thing, and it's not money either. I think so many people think, oh, money, and it's not. It's mentality. Do you have a scarcity mentality, or do you have an abundance mentality? I think it really does boil down to, how do you view life? How do you view you? How do you view the people in your life? Are people always trying to take something from you, or are you just, hey, I'm trying to give, and people are trying to give back to me too.
Awesome. Love it. Absolutely love it. So we're going to close this up, brother. But before we do, we talked about so much, and we could go on for at least another couple hours. But what do we not talk about that you'd like to ensure that our abundant leaders get out of our conversation today?
Oh boy, what do we not talk about? I think we didn't really talk about relationship with our kids so much. That's another big area, right? We talked about marriage and communication and how we can be our best friend and worst enemy and all that. But I think when it comes to relationship with your kids, I heard this quote a long time ago, and it's so true with kids, is the quality of our life depends on the quality of our questions we ask ourselves and other people. Every Friday I take my two older ones, or I take one of the older ones to breakfast before school on Fridays. And I took my 9-year-old this morning, and my 9-year-old is kind of going through a rough patch right now, where we always talk about the terrible 2s and the terrible 3s. Well, there's actually a 9. 9 is another pivotal age. It's kind of that preteen. They're not necessarily kids anymore, but they're not necessarily teenagers either. But they're just a little rebellious. So the conversations I've had with him lately have been more disciplinary. So I wanted to get out of that realm, and my first instinct when we went out to breakfast is I want to talk to him about all the things that he needs to brush up on, right? And I thought to myself, that's the wrong thing to do. This really needs to be a good quality conversation. So what questions can I ask him? So I Googled it. I was like, what's top questions to ask your kids? And I found so many resources and so many sites, and I found this one, top 25 questions to ask your kids. And we went through these questions, and oh my gosh, it turned into like the most amazing, fruitful conversation. And all these questions were not yes or no questions that he could answer. He had to explain them. So they were open-ended: what, when, why, how. And it was so amazing. So I think if you want to improve that relationship with your kids, I've heard this many times from other guests on my show, is do more asking, do less telling. And the questions that you ask, outside the box questions that they can't say yes or no to. So for instance, like, how was school today? You're going to hear good, you're going to hear fine. Those are the two words that they're going to say. We as men, same thing. Everything's good, everything's fine. Sometimes things are fine and good, sometimes they're good and fine. Same thing with kids. But if you ask these really in-depth questions, like, for instance, like, what's your favorite thing for us to do and why? That's just one example. You're going to have these amazing, fruitful conversations that will help that bond and strengthen that bond.
I absolutely love that. And since we're on that subject, I have another question for you. And this came up in one of my groups and some of the guys that I've been talking to. And it's a question from myself as well. That, we always say we want our kids to have better than we did and to have a better life and, all this stuff. The thing is I'm who I am because of my adversities that I went through in my life. Some of those adversities my kids are never going to go through, just because of the lifestyle that I've built for them. And they won't go through that as children. They may later on in life if something goes completely wrong. But bottom line is I am who I am because of those adversities, but I want my kids to kind of feel some of that as well. I don't want things to be too easy for them. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. I mean, some of the SEALs that I've had on the show, like for instance, Eric Davis, he wrote the book Raising Men. He was also he trained Chris Kyle. He was Eric Davis's sniper in the SEALs.
Yeah, Eric Davis was on my show as well. He's one of my earliest guests. Yeah, great guy.
Oh, he's
great
so
book
cool
too.
It is a great book, but if you read that book, another book for your listeners read, it's great. It's Raising Men, but it's really raising children. Mm-hmm. Putting your kids in uncomfortable situations where they have the opportunity to fail and it's out of their comfort zone and it's safe. So Eric Davis, like he talks about the examples of when he walks his daughters even though in Raising Men, he talks about his daughters, him and his daughters go for walks on the beach on these ginormous rocks where the waves are just crashing all around them, but he's right there next to them, and he's a SEAL, so he's really comfortable being in the water. If anything were to happen, he's fine. But the daughters, they're really, really scared, they're terrified, and he's like, I'm right here. You can go through it, you can walk through this, you can do this. But putting your kids in uncomfortable situations and not necessarily being the 100% safety net, but being maybe the 50% safety net, that if something happens, and I'm not talking about just physical uncomfortable situations, I'm talking about mental as well. Putting them in uncomfortable situations, it allows them to get out of that comfort zone. It allows them to make decisions. It allows them to fail. It allows them to pivot, and make new and different decisions that they otherwise wouldn't. So things like that, getting your kids in uncomfortable situations where they can fail.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. And thanks for reminding me of that, because I got to go back into that book. I've got it on audio, which is a funny story in itself, because it's some Australian dude that's the Eric and I, we had a conversation about that. He was like, I had no say in that, and I'm so pissed off about it, but he couldn't change it. But anyway, I love the story that he shares in there too about his whole family's basically on a cliffside.
Yes.
And they're kind of stranded, but not really. And another family's like, are you guys okay? Yeah, we're good. Don't worry about it, man. We're all right. Guys, you don't have to take it to that extreme. And thanks for reminding me of that again, Larry, because Eric really has quite a few great anecdotes in there and great stories from his own life and raising his own kids and getting them out of their comfort zone and having them feel that fear to grow, because you cannot grow in the comfort zone.
No, you can't.
Absolutely love it.
I think there's that quote, right? A comfort zone is great, but nothing grows there. I can't remember what it said.
Something like that, but 100% it definitely relates. So, brother, it's been a great conversation. This is one of the longest ones I've had, and I could just keep going on and picking your brain and just having this conversation, learning from each other for sure. But we got to close this up, man. I'm going to have all the links, all the books, everything that we talked about linked up in the show notes at menofabundance.com. And again, thanks for your time, man.
Oh, it's a pleasure, man. You got a great show, and I just want to say this real quick thing. I know we've gone over, but for those of you guys who are listening to Wally and his podcast, you got a great host here. This guy, man, he puts his heart and soul into this, and you are lucky to have him at the helm of this podcast, because he puts a lot of time, a lot of effort into this, and he's, as you can tell, he's very, very passionate about that.
Brother, I appreciate that. I really do.
You bet.
It means a lot.
You bet.
All right. Aloha.
All right. Aloha.
Man, as Larry and I talked about in our conversation, I had the privilege of hanging out with Larry and a bunch of the guys in his group, the Dad Edge Alliance, and I just had a blast. In that 1 hour that I was with this group, I really had a blast. And I've been in other masterminds, and I'm telling you, it doesn't matter what mastermind. Well, I'm not going to say it doesn't matter. It does matter what mastermind you get into, because you have to get into a mastermind that's going to help you grow, one that you can resonate with. And if hanging out with me is great, I would love to hang out with you, and I would love to help you grow in living a life of abundance. But if you're looking to be a better dad, we've had 2 great guests this week, one in Brandon Handley and the other in Larry Hagner. And regardless, I just want you to find a group of men that you can hang out with, that you can resonate with, that you're going to be able to contribute to, and you're going to be able to learn from. That's the whole purpose of getting into these groups, so that you can realize your power and realize how much you have to offer other men, and then take from other men what they have to give to you. So guys, that's what I have for you today. I want you to go out and live your life of abundance, and man, make sure to pay it forward.
That's all for today, Abundance Leaders. For more about our guests and the powerful information we shared with you today, be sure to sign up for our mailing list at menofabundance.com. We appreciate your time and look forward to hanging out with you on our next episode. So until then, be sure to pay it forward and live your life of abundance.